So this morning we are going to talk about some cool things we can do with Excel for Stellar Explorers. Okay, here's an example of a workbook that we made a couple years ago now. And so the first requirements that we put in we put in all the information that we had, right? So that we have all of it to look at. Here's your weight, here's how much it cost in millions, right? This is the bonus. And so basically what we were doing here is that we were trying to calculate our total score. So if you look here, we had put in various different restrictions and how these restrictions would factor into our score, and we were able to calculate our exact score. So none of this was automized. We would just put in the number that we wanted and then put in the factors that it gave us, and then from that we would get our score. Okay, so here you see a workbook that we made a couple years ago for a qualification round, and one of the important things that you should notice right away is that we put all the information we had in here. We wanted to make sure that we got our weight restrictions exactly right, because at the end of the day, that's one of the most important things. Weight restrictions is one of the easiest things to mess up that is easily avoidable, as well as money restrictions. On some very, very, very rare occasions, will going overweight benefit you? However, in the long run, staying underweight is the most advantageous way to approach this challenge. So let's set up a sheet like this. So what I've set up here is a chart that will help you make all the combinations. So the way you read it is that the bold is the first component. The next row is your second component. That's this right here. And then this row right here is your third component. So if you want a 1, 1, 1, that'll be this box. If you want a 1, 2, 1, that's this box. And if you want a 2, 2, 3 would be here. So this is really similar to the way that a codon chart works, if you've ever done anything with genetics. So let's set up this matrix. So our first consideration is to look at what's changing as we're dragging down, right? We want our third component to change from 1 to 3, and that means that our first and second component, we want to stay the same. So that's what I did. By putting in these dollar signs here, it tells Excel that we want this to stay in the very first row as we drag it, right? So let's drag it down, and if we get down here, we get a 1, 1, 3, right? So how are we going to change this so that when we drag it this way, we get the right sort of transition going on? Well, the first thing you have to notice is that this first component in this box is going to remain constant, right? So I'm going to put a dollar sign so that as we drag it to the right, this box isn't changing. Then also notice that this 2, this second component, is changing as you drag it to the right. But if we drag this to the right as it is now, it's going to pick up C5, right? So we want to change this to be congruent with that. So let's do that real quick. What I'm doing is I'm making this into a vertical, or from a vertical matrix into a horizontal, well, a vertical vector into a horizontal vector, right? So now this is still a 1, 1, 1, right? But when I drag it to the right, it's going to give us a 1, it's going to give us a 1, 2, and then a blank box. So what went wrong here? Well, we forgot to tell Excel that we want this column to remain constant for the the third variable. So let's undo that. Let's tell Excel we want this to remain constant, right? So now we drag it this way. What do we get? We get a 1, 2, 1, and a 1, 3, 1. And that's exactly what we wanted, right? 1, 3, 1. So now what we can do is we can just go ahead and drag this down and this will give us the right calculations for everything we needed. And the easy thing about it is you copy and paste your calculation, right? You move your boxes over. So here it's telling us that we have some nonsense sort of answer, right? So we want the second for the first component because we're starting at a 2, 1, 1, right? So let's pull this over 2, 1, 1. And let's see if this works. So we pull it down first. That's going to give us a 2, 1, 2. That's what we wanted, right? 1, 2, 1, 2. Yep. And then we drag this over. And we drag these down. So as you can see, you can repeat this. I'll skip forward in the video so that you don't have to watch me repeat this. And then we'll go ahead and talk about conditional formatting. Okay, so now we're going to conditionally format this data set so that we can easily see which values are over or under the weight limit. So you go up here into format and then conditional formatting. You're going to add a rule. So then we have a 2-color scale here. Let's make it something easier to see. Our minimum is a number. So let's say our number is 84, right? Highest value, let's call it a number. Let's also say 84. Right, so now what we're seeing is all the numbers in green are the numbers above 84, and the numbers in red are below 84. Right, so this tells us which of our components are over, which are under. So that's given that our weight limit is, say, 84 kilograms or whatever. Okay, so there's a little bit of an easier way to do this conditional formatting. Instead of having like a color scale, you can also go back into conditional formatting. And you can choose this style called Classic. And you specify that you only want numbers that are greater than equal to, say your weight restriction is 100, and you filled it with dark red text. Hit OK. Now it'll highlight the ones you can't use, and you can ignore those values, right? So say I change this to like 120.78. Now more of our values are going to be red. So as I mentioned before, you're going to want to go in and calculate your points, right? So you do that by setting up this sort of calculation area in Excel. So this is all given like the factors in the scenario booklet that were given to us. You set up a sort of equation for how many points you're going to get. And this way you can just go ahead and calculate your total score, even if all you know is your combination.